Welcome everyone to Doodle to Doing. I'm your host, Karen Light, Creative Executive Function Coach for creatives at How Doodle. And here we doodle discuss concepts and practical tips for helping you achieve your creative goals. This Doodlecast is designed to be interactive, so please grab something to doodle on and doodle with to get the full experience as you follow along. Today, we're going to talk about unleashing your creative flow. We all want to be in our creative flow. People want to go with the flow and flow with it all and feel the flow. Heck, even people who don't identify as creatives are always talking about finding the flow state, which, by the way, is a very creative space. Why? Why do we all want to be in this creative flow? What is so freaking special about this flow? Well, if you ask me, it's because whenever we are in our creative flow, we are in our genius. We are communing with, expressing, and simply being that unique cocktail that we were born to be, no matter what exactly we're doing. The what is so much less important than the how. The how is this genius. The how is the flow. The how is you. The how is how you do it, think about it, approach it, swim with it, and exude it as your gift into the world. Go figure. That thing that brings you the most joy is your path and what the world needs most. So, since we're so good at blocking it all, we've got to do a doodle cast on this. And here to doodle and chat with me about some of the reasons we block ourselves and ways that we can burst through these blocks is a glittery queen of creativity, Shannon McDonald. Did you like that intro, Shannon?
I love
Welcome.
it. Thank
Glittery queen of creativity, just like flew out of me. It was great.
you.
And for good reason. So, along those lines, would you like to share with people a little bit more about the creative that you are?
Sure. So I am the artist behind Pop Shop Universe. I find that when we did our little doodle, I'm an artist where I feel like there's a little bit of magic and a whole lot of love. That
Mhm.
I love what I do. I love color and glitter and sparkle, and I really think that that is what you see with my work.
Yeah, you do. It's so fun. You're always so like experimental with it and like, ooh, I like this. This is pretty. How do I put this into a piece?
I'm like,
Or
if there's glitter, silver leaf, gold leaf, I will do it. Gems, let's have a party.
Yeah, let's have a party with the art. I like it. Oh, I think it's so fun and such a good foray into what we're talking about, right? Because these blocks, sometimes I think are caused by not giving ourselves permission to just love
Mm,
glitter if we love glitter. Like, how easy would it be to be like, oh, that's a child's play thing? And instead you're like, no, it is the main attraction of my artwork?
yeah, and I think that's important is to find something that no one else has to love it. People do. The people that are like you and like your work, they will find you. And I think it's important to really be true to yourself as an artist and find those things that you love.
Yes.
So,
Okay. So we're gonna dig into that. Let's get some stuff out of the
mhm,
way for a second so that we can really, because sometimes people out there might be thinking like, I hear you, but I don't know what my thing is. Like I don't know what it is. And so I just feel stuck and bleh, bleh, right? So let's
mhm,
let's help everybody out there. And even if you think you know what your thing is, this is still really great activities that we're going to be doing to help you whenever you have stuck moments, because we all get there, or maybe to
yeah.
go or refine what you're doing even more, like discover a new little gem that you didn't know really unlocks your creativity. So the first thing I'm going to invite everybody to do, and we're going to do with you, is to just do a quick dump out all the reasons why you think you or we as humans get creatively blocked. So just dump it out for yourself, just over 30 seconds, kind of come up with some thoughts there. my gosh, this list is
Mhm.
longer than I thought it was going to be. I know I'm not done. I could keep going for a while, but let's see what let's talk about what we have. It's already
Sure.
overwhelming me. I'm like, geez. What are some of the things that are popping up on that list for you?
So I think like a lot of artists and especially people that I've encountered is like, I'm not good enough. My process is
Mm,
enough, my art isn't good enough. And I think like, every artist feels that way. Every artist does on
yes.
some
Yes.
level.
Secret.
Right.
Secret.
And or like I'm too much, or maybe it's a dumb idea, or it's been done before. We've all heard that, right? It's been done.
Oh, not
Right.
original. Mhm.
Yeah,
And I
someone
love
else.
what you said, even that juxtaposition of like, it's not, it's not good enough and I'm too much. Like, where
Right.
do you win? But we seem to fluctuate between
Yeah.
those two things and you can't win. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
I also put, why start? And I think that that is sometimes when you start to focus on all of these, negatives, then then that is that crushing overwhelm of why do I even start? And I think that's where a lot of people get really blocked is the overwhelm of all of these, what feels like crushing negatives.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Uh, like if you don't have a driving why, that can be really hard because I mean, some of the things that came up on my list, like one of them especially was like criticism, right? Like the inner and the outer critic. So if you
100%.
and they're going to show up both of
Oh,
those are going to show up, and so if you
yeah.
don't have a bigger like why or like something to stand on and
Yeah.
stand in, it's hard to face those things.
Sure.
It'll block you before you get started.
Yeah.
um yeah, I think one of the first things that came up for me too was like the wrong rules, and maybe it was inspired by what we were just talking about with glitter, like glitter can't be for adult artwork or something, I
Yeah.
know for a long time I would never put hearts in my artwork because somebody told me it was really unprofessional or not what fine artists do or something when I
Oh,
was younger. And now of course they're everywhere. But and you have hearts in yours, so I know you get it. But like these wrong rules, like we have
yeah.
really unhelpful ones in our heads. And I think there's also like uh if we don't have enough juice going on in our life, we can feel really exhausted and dried out by
Yes.
everything.
Yeah.
And so we've got to find ways to kind of put the juice back in to the day
Mhm.
so that you don't just show up to your artwork and then it doesn't happen and you're like, why? And think it's something wrong with you.
Right.
Yeah, and I think going with that criticism and inner and outer criticism is just fears. There's a lot of
Yeah.
fears about showing up and being vulnerable in that way. I mean, art feels so personal.
Yes, and it is scary, and I think it is important as an artist to show up for yourself and just be true to yourself because it's scary when I put stuff out there. I mean, even still sometimes where I'm like, "I love this so much," and if people don't, like, it might be crushing, but also I'm like, I found some kind of tricks along the way of what works for me, and, I think having been an artist for the past like 20 years, you start to figure out what works for you, what doesn't, and it's just a process and every person is different too. But yeah, finding flow, finding your reasons why, and also finding your craft and what you really enjoy, those are what will keep bringing you back and keep you creating.
Yeah.
So
And I
it's a
really liked what you said, like show up for yourself, right?
mhm,
I think that's a key point too, is that often we're showing up for everybody but us.
right.
And so we are not practiced at doing that. And it can take some practice showing up, you know.
Absolutely.
Sometimes I think of art as just it's its own living, breathing entity. And if you've ignored it for a long time, it doesn't exactly trust you right away. Right. It's like,
Oh,
are you sure you're gonna be? We'll see. We'll see if you keep showing up. Right. Consistency builds trust, right?
yeah. Yeah, and
Hmm.
mean, there's been different periods in my life where things going on, personal things, and there was one year where I did not make anything. I created nothing. I had no energy for it, no space for it, and then also finding my way back to it and just being like, okay, like 5 minutes. We're gonna just sit here. And I mean, now looking back, I was like, well, that was like awful. Just to put paint on a canvas, and I just needed to start. And I
Mhm.
think that is so important, of just being like, I am making this an active choice to create and to find some time and space for this.
Mhm.
And that can be very small at first, and then you can build on that. So
Yeah.
setting the
Yeah,
right
I had
foundation.
a I
So
and that 5 minutes can be the foundation and all the I mean, I have a very similar thing with a 5-minute thing, and it's so yes, and that could go back to even wrong rules that, a rule that we often make up is that this like, if I don't have a half a day to make something, that's one of my rules that I have to constantly fight in my head. If I don't have a half a day, then it's not worth it. Yes, it is. It's
yes.
totally worth it. I've been just, that's been one I've been fiercely reworking in myself this
Yeah.
year. Is just rewriting that story. It's not helpful. So with your list, everybody, I want you to circle maybe some of the ones we said you added to it. I added to mine as Shannon was talking. Um, but I want you to circle one that feels really present for you. That feels like, oh, this one comes up, or maybe this is a route to some of the other things. Oh, I didn't say this one too, and I have to mention it. I can't help myself, right? Like just societal messages that it's not important. Like
Mm.
like creating is frivolous or a luxury or inessential.
Sure.
Um, and so of course we've internalized that and then we don't prioritize it, right? So it can feel very blocked in that way too. Just have to mention that one because boom,
Mhm.
so huge. Okay. Ooh, I'm having a hard time. Which one? Which one? Okay, I'm just gonna go with it. I'm gonna go with this one. 'Cause I'm having a busy, busy couple weeks and I'm feeling sometimes a little exhaustion coming on. So that can definitely block me. Which one
Yeah.
did you choose?
I chose someone else does it better.
Oh, so yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
they all hit. They all hit. I'm sure every one of them is hitting everybody because they all hit. Okay, so
Yeah.
what we're gonna do over the next 60 seconds is that one that you chose, I want you to doodle how that feels. And we're going to do kind of a little story with these 3 doodles that we're about to do. So I'm going to invite you to do that on the left side of your paper,
Okay.
whatever paper you got on the left side, doodle whatever you circled, how that makes you feel, whatever that looks like to you. Oh my gosh, I just realized I put 5 minutes instead of 1 minute on the timer.
Yep.
So we've got about 18 more seconds, people, not 4 minutes and 18 seconds. This is just quick to capture something. We don't want to overthink it too much. Finishing it up. Yes. Okay, so what does yours feel like to you? I'm just finding it really fascinating too. Like it's angry, but it's also like, I don't know, like hidden,
Hmm.
like coming out
Right.
of the
Like, oh,
shadows.
like
It almost looks like a hoodie is around them too. And they're just like a little hiding.
it's that mystery person. Like, who's doing it better? Who's doing it
Yeah.
better than, like,
Yeah.
particular person? It's just this idea that I think that you can just like build up in your head, of like, oh, these mystery people. And sure, there's artists that have different crafts, but just that idea of someone on the internet.
Yeah.
No.
It's a shady voice, you all. Look at that picture. It's a shady voice. Don't trust that voice in your head. It's shady. It's so good. It's so true. And sometimes I think, when we look at it in this way, we realize it's easier not to buy into it, right? It's like, oh, that's just that over there. Yeah, here's what mine the hidden kind of there
Oh,
too.
oh, look at those little eyes.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting, right? And I think
Yeah,
that's how it feels like when I'm tired. It's just foggy,
feels like heavy.
and it's like
Yeah,
heavy up here.
yeah,
And one thing I've been pondering a lot lately is just how much, I mean, not negating our real need for rest, right? But like when I think sometimes of exhaustion or like fatigue, like those kinds of words that are like, I don't know, they indicate a little they feel a little different to me. And I think of it as like a headiness.
sure,
It's how I'm thinking about something or trying to do too much from my head as opposed to like being in my body and expressing my spirit enough, which gives me a lot more juice, right?
sure.
And I think sometimes we go through periods where we're really busy and that is easier to pile on, but I'm questioning whether it's necessary, right? Like I'm always like, what is it necessary? I don't know if I want to just be resigned to that. So we're going to ponder that in my doodle a little bit today. Because I do think, right, people are tired. People are
Yes.
tired for good reason. There's a lot to be tired about.
Yeah.
And
People
how,
have personally, there's a lot going on in the world. There's just
yeah.
work and family and all of these things that then can become overwhelming and feel crushing at times. So I
Mhm.
understand.
Yeah, it's like totally legitimate feeling to have. And how do we navigate that also when we're still feeling like we want to do something? We have something we want to make, we want to create, somehow we have to find our way through that. So, and then if we're worried that on the other side of it, all we're going to get is criticism, double whammy,
Oh,
right?
we're, we're creating roadblocks for ourselves.
Double whammy. Okay, so on the other side of your paper, on the right side of your paper, leaving some space in the center, I want you now to think about what it feels like to be in that flow. What does that look like to you to be in creative flow? And I'm going to try to put 60 seconds on this time and not 5 minutes, because we're
Sure.
just going to go for 60 seconds. Go ahead and capture your flow. What does that feel like to you? Goes fast. Ooh, something interesting started coming up there. All right. What does your flow feel like, Shannon?
And very opposite, which is literal like
Yeah.
a river, but then we got some stars where it feels very in alignment, very easy, kind of like look like a little lazy river.
A lazy river. Oh, can we reclaim that word in our process, please? Thank you. I love that that came out of it. Lazy river. Ooh, can
And
I
then sometimes,
ask you? Oh,
a little bit like wider in parts, kind of like easier where those ideas are really flowing. Other times it's still
mm,
moving, but maybe just a little bit slower or faster, depending. So I really liked
okay.
that.
There's
Yeah.
two things in there that I think are super juicy.
Yeah.
Well, I'll name them both so I don't forget, and then we'll talk about what you think of them. So one is lazy, that word that came up. Find that
Mm,
super juicy. And then the second thing that comes up when you talk about sometimes wider and less, like more of a flow, less of a flow, or whatever, skinnier,
yeah,
sometimes it's like how to manage our expectations maybe around it, and like expect ebbs and flows versus expecting it all to look like one thing. Ooh, which
right.
one is calling to you of those two topics?
As far as like, oh, like the lazy or
The
the,
lazy or different days or different flows, right?
I mean, both do, because I feel
Yeah.
like I like to be lazy sometimes, and that's
Hmm.
okay. Lazy with my artwork, and I think I used to be so self-critical. I used to be like, you need to be making, you need, and I was like, why are we putting this pressure on ourselves? Like, this isn't homework. No one's going to be grading this. And so I think that, yeah, there's times where I'm like, I don't want to go into my artwork where I'm already like stressed, have these expectations upon myself. And so I think for me, I don't see the word lazy as like a negative, probably like I used to. Now I see it as a way to really be like, I want to be in ease, in flow. And
Mm,
sometimes like my process is protracted and it is long, and I'm okay with that because I'm creating for me. I'm not creating to meet anyone else's marker of success.
mm,
And I think that was also really important to learn along the way. And I think that ties into the ebbs and flows of creativity, where, yeah, there are times where I'm like, things are just firing, and I'm like super psyched for life, and I'm like, I'm going to do all these things, and I do. And so I think just allowing yourself capacity for both, for and that kind of also ties in with the seasons too. Like, I can be more creative sometimes in the spring or fall, or different times of the summertime. It all just kind of um it just really depends. And I think just allowing myself either that laziness or that excitement makes for a much better creative process.
hmm. Oh, I love so many things about what you said. It's hard to even pick.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do. I think that that's so like our we have created this really unhealthy expectation of hyper productivity
Sure.
that doesn't allow for slowness,
Yeah.
for sometimes, like, winter is a lot about just going within and being like, what's there? What do I not want to be there? What do I want to, like, what's happening? Let me reflect
Right.
for a while. And if you haven't given yourself time to just go in and reflect, it can be really difficult to then pull something out. Like, what are you even pulling out if you don't know what's there? How can you pull it
Right.
out? You know?
Right. And
Yeah.
I'm not a machine. We're not built to
Mm,
reach these productivity goals. I'm like, or else then my work does reflect that. Then I feel like if I'm not making for me, um, it's not good, because it's
mhm.
not, then there's stress. There's these, and I know because I've done that where I'm like, I need to make all these things. And then afterwards, I was like, why did you put yourself through that? Like, for what?
Yeah.
Like, for a algorithm that is dictated by some company? Like, that doesn't work for me.
Mm-mm.
And yeah, I think just allowing myself permission to be lazy and to take time, that I'm not going to be productive every single day, because I don't want to be. I
Yeah.
want to contemplate, to think about placement, to think about like, what symbols do I want to include in this piece, and what do those mean? And sometimes it's like, hey, I got to get these pieces down, and then that leads to another idea. Whereas if I
Hmm.
want to plan everything out, I'm like, I'm just making a checklist. I'm not making art at that point.
Yes.
That Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think like there's I always feel like it's really art for me when there's a dance, right? When I'm like receiving, and you have to allow yourself to receive inspiration. You have to be open to that piece of things. If not, you're maybe um, you're recreating something that you've created before that looks a little different, but it doesn't feel like art to me. It doesn't feel like something new or magical. Um, in the same way, like I could force my way through something, but that's not why we got into art making. We didn't get
Yeah.
into it like we could go work a 9 to 5 and force our way through something like, like why?
Right.
And
And like,
I really,
to
yeah.
have the freedom to create, to have the freedom to take my time and to explore. And I think that a lot, and I don't say like all artists, but I think at different phases you do feel maybe that pressure of like, oh, things are like really, they're really selling, or I have this event coming up, and I understand that. But I think, yeah, just like allowing
Mhm.
myself to like relax
Yeah. And
and
the
chill
funny
out.
thing is too, right? Like for me, like I really enjoy a slow morning and I am lucky to, have the type of lifestyle that supports a slow morning.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about it is like if I don't have a slow morning, my days are a lot harder. My
Sure.
ideas are fewer.
Yeah.
And I do have certain with my illustration work, I do have deadlines, right? Like I do have things that have to be done at a certain time. People are expecting them from me. I need a
Mhm.
paycheck. Like all these things are
Right.
happening.
Yeah.
Um, and maybe that's why with my own paintings, I just let them take as long they want to. Like there's
Yeah.
balance in that way, but there's also like if I have a slow morning, the ideas tend to just come and I just sit down and it's easier to work. Like it's easier.
Right.
I'm in a receptive space, I'm in a calm space, and I can transition into it with more ease. So yeah, that laziness is just, so I mean, I just watch my cats, right? And I'm like, you guys got it figured out. Like you just find in the sun and laying in it. It's perfect. Like, like I'm just gonna be more like my cats.
Yeah. And thing, like I know, on some weekends I'm like, yep, I want to get up, I want to relax for a little bit, have my coffee, make my way into my studio here. And then I like a productive morning in that way of like, okay, let's get things set up and see what happens and have my coffee. And there's that excitement, but there's not that
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
I think, a lot of us put a lot of pressure to create and to do all this stuff. And I find that same thing, like when you rush your mornings, it's like you're rushing through life. And sometimes we just need to like get grounded, see, you know,
Yeah.
settle.
Sink into it. Get into
Yeah.
like the richness that's below that surface
Yes.
grind, ugh. Yeah. So that's a perfect segue into this next doodle, which is I want you all to think about a time when you were stuck,
Hmm.
creatively blocked. And this could be a big time in your life. I know Shannon, you were talking about a whole year. It could be something
Sure.
like that. Maybe it's long for you and it was a long time, or maybe it was just like in an afternoon you felt stuck. But what I want you to think about a time when you got yourself unstuck from being stuck.
Hmm.
And what helped you with that? What helped you with that? Whether it was a really long process or something you were able to do in an afternoon, doesn't matter. Just capture that right smack dab in the middle of your paper now. seconds. All right. I would love for you to share your
Okay.
story of what,
So
yeah.
this little lady,
Mm.
and I think it is important to really ground yourself. And for me, it was like, let's release these expectations, let's ground ourselves. And I feel like, when those times of either being blocked or stuck, whatever you want to call it, I'm just like, okay, we have to we're not going to think about, you know any of the things that I have to do. We don't need to go grocery shopping, we're not going to clean anything right now.
Ah,
Really
yes.
present in. And that could be, sometimes it's, sitting on my couch and just drawing. I think it's just like we're just gonna be really grounded and kind of set the scene, because if you're frantic, like that's not a way to create at all. Like, I mean,
Mm,
you can, and I've done it, but
mhm.
then you realize you're like, oh yeah, my line work was off, or whatever, because you weren't in the right headspace. And I think being very intentional for me about my creative process is very important. I have to be in the right headspace for it, because then I can like listen to myself and see like,
Mhm.
okay, where are placements of things going? What do I want to do? And I think you can only do that for me when I'm very grounded and when I'm kind of listening intuitively to myself. And then that is where I find the flow. And, sometimes it's if there's a lot going on, it's harder than other times. And then I just found that, sometimes it's like, we're just going to do, we're just going to do 5 minutes and that's it. Those 5 minutes, sometimes it's like, okay, you did it. We're done. Most of the time, it's not, you know,
Yes.
it's just enough to be like, or just grounding yourself in the way of like, I don't know what I need to do, but I just got to start painting something. And so I'll just grab a blank piece of canvas, and it's just that action, just enough to get out of this critic and into more of this space where you're not thinking like, what does this line mean? You know what I mean?
Yes.
It is more of
Uh,
like, okay, we're just, and if it's just a canvas that we're prepping, that's okay. There's plenty of days where I just will prep stuff. I'm like, you know what? We don't know what we want to make. And then I feel like sometimes I'm like, oh, we're just gonna do some mark making and then put it away. And then but then I'll maybe revisit it a week later and be like, oh, I can build off of this. So I think that just grounding and getting into the act of actual creation is kind of how I've been able to kind of get over some of those blocks and some of those humps, is just to just put pen to paper, just, you know, start painting something, just start, I think is the biggest thing. Get out of your head and just start.
yeah. Okay, you said
Mhm.
so many good things. I want to repeat some of them. So feel free, listeners, to write some of these things in the middle of your paper, right? Like these are some ideas to move you from one state that we doodle to the next state. And some of the things that I heard Shannon say that I just love. One was set the scene.
Mhm.
Sometimes we're very focused on like making the work, but sometimes if you just set the scene, the work unfolds. So,
Absolutely.
what's my space feeling like? Do I have my cup of tea? Is the music right? Does it smell okay? Like, do I have my materials? Like, do I have some books or whatever it is that inspires me around? Do I
Yeah.
take some deep breaths just to feel calm there? Like, set that scene is so gorgeous. I love that. And like making these smaller achievable goals that could just they're more low risk in a way, right? Like you were saying, just do
Yeah.
some marks or prep your canvases. Have some of those things ready for yourself, because I think what they also do is help you transition. Like that,
Mhm.
we don't give ourselves a lot of room for transition these days, and I think that's a word that could encapsulate a lot of what we're talking about. We expect ourselves to come in from a long day at work and then sit down and make artwork. And it's like, that's not going to work. Or you just took care of your kids and put them to bed and now you're going to make artwork. Like these things aren't easy to do. Like you need some transition time,
Mhm,
and these low risk tasks, these achievable goals. And just in your brain, like from a neuroscientific standpoint, what you
mhm.
do, like if you just are able to say, like, I'm going to spend 5 minutes making marks on a paper and you do it, your brain just reads that as success.
Right. Yep.
And guess what it does? It gives you dopamine, which makes
Yes.
you motivated, which is why you're more likely to keep going or at least pick it back up the next day because it's like, oh,
Right.
that was good. I've now started a success loop.
Yep.
Um, yeah, and that I love how you also talked about like just moving from as soon as you start doing something with your hand, you release yourself from your head.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think too, there's a certain, playlist that I like to, or, I'll put on, I have, noise canceling headphones just so then there's not any other, stimuli happening. I'm very aware of, the lighting that I have too,
Yes.
but
Mhm.
things that I've kind of built on throughout the years. I think for me, it was just like, we just need to start. And that could be, yeah, something just very small. Because then the
Mhm.
next day you're like, okay, well, I did it. I showed up for myself. I did it. And let's just kind of keep doing it.
Yeah.
And yeah,
And maybe it can be simple and maybe it can be
right.
easier than I thought with these low risk things. And that's
Yeah.
sort of what, so here's my little doodle in the middle and then I started writing things you were saying around it. But um I had this time and you might have heard me tell this story before, but it was just so pivotal to me. And I had this time where, it was 2 or 3 years after I started my illustration company and I was just very caught up in client work, right? Like, and that was important. I was learning a lot about business and
Sure.
also like how to work with clients and how I wanted to work with clients and so many things. But I was so frustrated in my own practice. Like I felt so blocked and like I lost the thread. I had always had the thread and it was gone. And I was super not happy about that. I would start things and stop. And then I went on
Yep.
this very, very long road trip. 8 months before a pandemic. So it just all became a
Yeah.
big blur. But um, I just out of desperation it wasn't this book exactly, but like a little one.
Yeah.
And I was driving into New Mexico and I was like, this landscape, like I had never been to the desert before. And it just
Magical.
blew my mind. And I just had to like capture it somehow. Right. Like that's all. So I just like 5 minutes, whipped something out. And I was like, not my best work, but boy, did that feel good. I finished something. Like it felt like a complete thing. Right. And so
Yep.
that just started the doodling, which became so many things for me, so many things. So it's, it's a lot of these things that we're talking about. It was low pressure. I
Yep.
didn't have this expectation that I was a part because I always thought of it's just habitual. Like this is going to be a body of work. And what's the body of work? And how do I see this in a exhibit? And how am I going to display? Like all that was gone. I had no expectations from this little doodle. And
Right.
so it was like, okay, you can have your creativity since you're not
Right.
expecting me horrible things that are too much for me. I'll show up for you.
Right.
And it was fun. It was just fun. And that's
Yeah.
something I really like about your work, Shannon. Every time I see it, I'm like, she's having fun.
I am. Well, because drudgery where I felt, back in the day when I was doing wholesale and making these little bowls. And I was just I was a little mini factory. And I was like, this is no way for me to be creative. It allowed no room for new ideas. And I was like, I'm not, and I know some people that love it. I am not a production maker. I'm not. And of people that can, throw the same, cups and all those things. That is not my path. And where I thrive on new ideas and, symbols and things and the connection to us and the world around us. And I was like, yeah, I can't keep making the same thing. And so I think also kind of sometimes doing what you realize it's because it's all a journey, right? Like, oh, well, I did this and that didn't make me happy. So then let's maybe slowly, where else can we go? And yeah, and then it should, for me, I need to have fun when I'm doing this. I
Mhm.
love the gold leaf, the silver leaf, glitter and gems and all the things. And I didn't do it for a while because I thought it wasn't serious artwork. And I'm like, I don't really care. Like,
Not really a
if
serious person, so
I I've done
there's
that,
enough of that in the world. Yeah.
yeah, and I
Mhm.
this is what really brings me happiness. And yeah, people are buying it. So I prove myself wrong.
Yeah, which is good to do, and I think you prove part of yourself wrong probably, right? You proved the inner critic wrong, and then you
Yes.
proved the part of you that always knew right, and now she shines brighter,
Right.
and I think you said something else really beautiful in there, which is like, you don't have to figure it all out like ahead of time. You go and try some things and you say, oh, I liked this and I didn't like this. So now let me just pivot to incorporate more of this and see what happens when I go down this road. And I
Right.
do think that's something that blocks us is trying to figure it all out ahead of time instead of
Yeah.
being on the journey,
$100%.
like, and that's why I think the how is so important. Your approach
Right.
is so important because if you enjoy your approach, you'll just be on the journey with, you won't mind as much,
Right. Yeah. Like
Mhm.
sometimes I'm like, oh, I know I have a general idea of what I want to include. And then other times I'm like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Like legit. Just like I
Yep.
know I may want to use a certain color, or we're gonna start there. Um yeah, like and so for example, this piece is an homage to the eclipse that we had recently. And so I was like, I want to do like a big statement piece. I didn't know actually what I was gonna make. I was like, I love the moon. I think this should be a piece about the moon. Well, then I had this big circle here, and then I realized it was off center, and that was gonna drive me crazy. And then I was like, we need to make something work. And then literally I was like, yes, there's an eclipse that's going to be happening. So this, yes, is about the moon, but also about the sun. And so then, this piece happened, and then, oh, it's in the center. So that's what I'm like. Sometimes there aren't mistakes. You can still, yes, I could have, painted over it and started again. But sometimes just going with an idea and seeing where it takes you, like that's part of the fun too, is allowing the things that maybe you think are mistakes. I wouldn't change any of this now, none of it. So I think just also letting things unfold too, which goes back to take the pressure off yourself. Let's start to release those expectations. How about we make this, it's not like I'm carving in granite here. You know what I mean? Like canvas,
Yes.
like it, I can just paint over it. And that has happened with many pieces where I'm like, oh, I don't like this. And some I've kept for years, revisited, and I'm like, oh, I love it now. So I think just kind of, again, like relaxing into your creativity, I also think is really important too. Like we can get blocked, and we've all been there. And I think it sometimes is those small steps. And then again, I think as artists, we tend to want to be these perfectionists, or at least me. I don't know about you. Um,
Well, our inner
where-
critics certainly want us to be, right? They
right,
certainly do. Yeah.
just being like, okay, we can, again, we can add more paint, we can fix stuff. We can also just put it away if we really just aren't liking where this piece is
Yes.
going. Start again.
Permission.
Like it's okay.
Yeah.
Everything is fine.
Oh, so important. Like we all have unfinished works around. You are not failing because you have unfinished works. I
Right.
always think to myself, like, it hasn't revealed its secret yet.
Right.
So I'm
Yeah.
not sure, or I need to learn something first and then it will
Yeah.
click. Like I'll know where to go with this as soon as learn the secret that I'm supposed to learn and then it
Right.
happens, and I love that. I'm seeing like I'm just having this idea of recording more artists telling about how their work unfolded because I think that would be so I always love hearing it. A, it's just interesting, right?
Yeah,
Everybody's process. But B, because that's a lot of what happens. I didn't expect this. This happened. And it made me
right,
think about this. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And because you didn't expect that to happen, that's when the magic happened, right?
right,
That's when it became like, this is something. I'm on to something. I got it. I'm going, right?
right.
And like I have a piece now that I've been working on. And when I opened up took the packaging off of the canvas, it had a hole in it, like a tear. And I was like, oh crap, I either return this or let me get a new canvas out. And then I'm like, or do I work with the hole? You
Right.
know? And it became like the cool, it's still unfolding. So I'm not done yet, but it's like
Yeah.
so, and I've been working on this thing since like February. It'll unfold, it's happening. But it's,
Oh, I
it's
had,
just one of those things. Yeah.
yeah, I had a finished piece that then literally I like was over like head photographing it and I dropped my phone and I tore the canvas and I was like, okay. And then
Okay.
okay, well, like I found some beautiful gold thread that I have, and it became part of the piece of like this greater idea of like nothing is perfect here. Like, and to see the stitches in the actual canvas of where the tear was, then became this beautiful symbol of the piece.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
think that those are the fun things
Those
of
are the fun things. They
right.
really are. That's what we're in it for, is for those moments of like, oh, that's something new. That's just so juicy and yummy to explore and be in and realize.
Yeah,
And I think there's one other thing with this too. If our art is the only place in our life where we allow ourselves to have this moment, first of all, great. At least you have a space. But if
right.
you can allow more of your life to unfold in that way, it is easier to be in the creative process with your art too, because you're in the flow of that way of thinking about
Yeah,
life. You know, you're
yeah,
practicing, you're practicing the same headspaces,
sure.
the same mindsets, the same following your heart, the same listening, the same, being
Mhm.
curious about the things that happen that shock us and shouldn't have happened and blah blah blah, the things we think about that, and being like, well, I wonder why that happened. Is there something here that's kind of cool? you
Yeah.
know I think that's a really important thing to think about, is like the minds, like you captured so beautifully when you talked about setting the scene. Like, if more of your life you set the scene, how could that just spill into your work?
Oh, yeah.
um
You're, like, angry at the world and, like, white knuckling through life. I mean,
mhm,
your artwork is gonna show that,
mhm,
and believe me, there's times that I was like that, and I'm gonna control all these things,
mhm.
and, I mean, yeah, that's a great place to think, but, like, what do we really control? I don't know. I mean, I control this artwork because I make it, but it's also
Until you
because
drop
I
your phone on it.
you drop your are. I mean, there's same thing with like a limit of like the artist perfectionism. I'm like, there's just a limit to that. Like, I am not going to drive myself to have a little mentee B mental breakdown over something that like literally I'm like, nothing is perfect here. And I
Mhm.
don't want it to be. I don't want that to be like, oh, her artwork's perfect. No, thank you. I want to show the humanness. I want to show that a person actually made this. I want to show that mistakes can happen, that you can drop your phone on a canvas and you can still make it beautiful. Like that, I think goes just back to the greater idea of like, can we just be gentler with ourselves, with artwork?
Mhm.
Um, because then once you kind of allow and let things unfold, it does bring you to, I feel like, a much easier space of creativity, of overcoming those blockages, because it's like, hey, I'm showing up for myself and I don't know what this is going to look like tonight, but I'm here. And it could be 5 minutes, it could turn into 5 hours. I don't know.
Mhm.
But that's also kind of the fun part of it as well is this past Saturday working on a big piece and I was like, this would be a great day to get a lot done, but also I'm not going to put that pressure on myself. I made for the entire day. It was like 9 to 1 and then I was like, okay, like you actually have to eat. Had lunch, and then the rest of the day until honestly it got dark. And I was like, wow, like that was amazing because I had no expectation. I was
Mhm,
like, if you get stuff done, great. If you
mhm,
don't, you've allowed plenty of time to finish this piece. There's no stress here because I don't like to have that pressure on my artwork. I just feel like that's when I make mistakes because then I have this immense pressure to then you can get into that mindset of like, oh, I gotta do all these things now because I need it to be perfect. And I was like, it's just a
mm-mm.
way to work for me.
Yeah, no, and something we often don't think about is like usually our imperfections are the things that make it ours.
Yeah.
Like that's where it looks like a Shannon McDonald versus somebody else, you know?
Like, I like to
Um,
brush strokes. I want to see
yeah,
part process
yes.
and the learning of things. And I think that's what I enjoy, you know?
Mhm,
So
mhm.
yeah,
Yes.
I think yeah, let ease back the dial. Give yourself
Ease back the dial, y'all. Be
yeah,
gentle. Yes.
I jammies, like
Mhm,
I get comfy, you know,
mhm.
have good
And
music and
yeah, I think that is such an important thing is to like you said earlier too about listening with yourself. And we were
yeah,
talking about how some days are different than other days. And I think it's really important to check in and be like, not expect that you need something, like not expect that in order to create, you need the same thing each day.
right,
I know sometimes for me, I'm just like, I'm really tired of being in my desk and I need to do some illustration work. I'm going to go sit on my couch and watch some rerun because if I watch a new show, I can't do it. But if I watch a rerun, like something I've watched a minute, rerun, you know where I'm
oh,
from. We don't even, people don't these
right,
days are like, what are you talking about? Uh,
yeah,
rewatch a show that I've seen 20 times and like just the comfort of it and being in it doesn't make
yeah,
it any like there's no rules. Like you get to create how you need to create that day or not.
right,
And if you're having a sleepy kind of day, it's good to have options about what it means to show up for yourself. Like what are your
sure,
options? Maybe it's I'm going to sit in the corner and read this book because it inspires me.
right,
Um, and I'll just trust that that will add to the beautiful concoction of creative ideas in my head that will come out when they're ready. And some
right,
days it's like, yeah, I'm ready to work from 9 to 9. Let's go, But what do you
and
need?
right. One thing that also is really interesting is, yeah, like I found sometimes I'm like, yeah, like if you're feeling this pressure of being in either your space or the way that you normally create, I'm always like, get outside. If it's, I live in New England, so if it's the wintertime, go for a drive. Just kind of sometimes also changing the space of just being like, I'm just gonna, not think, put on some good music, go for a ride, get out of here for 20 minutes. Or
Yes.
I one friend at one point, which I actually found extremely helpful. She was like, my creativity is tied to the cycles of the moon. And I was like, oh, really? And then I actually started like tracking and not like neurotically, because I tend to do that, but being like, oh yeah, there's like just realizing like, oh, it was a full moon and I actually created stuff. And even that of like that took some of that pressure off of like, I don't need to be creative every single day. I can also have phases. I can have phases like the moon where it's kind of this culmination. And then, yes, there's a lot of creation, maybe in that 1 week around the full moon. And so I think for each person, it was different, but kind of hearing that, I was like, oh, that took that pressure off of not
Mhm.
like I had to be creative every single day of the week because for me that's not sustainable. And that just seeing like, well, maybe it's just once a month for like a week where I'm like then really focused. And so I think also allowing that play of time and checking in and knowing like, well, maybe that's how my cycle works. Or maybe I like to be creative 5 minutes every single day and I like those incremental goals. It's like there's no rules, but I think you as an artist over time, if you try enough of these exercises and kind of also address like, how do you feel? Like, do I like to make for 5 minutes every day? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Do I notice that maybe on the full moon I'm more creative? Yeah, that eased that like inner critic and that pressure off of myself. And I think just kind of being aware, because I think as artists, we're very sensitive and aware of things, or at
Mhm.
least that's how my practice is, that then that also eased that pressure of like, let's just try, let's just talk to other artists and see what works for them. And maybe that works, maybe it doesn't. And so yeah, I think
Mm.
there are rules, but there's not at the same time. Like,
Yeah.
what are your, you know what I mean? Like for
Yeah.
everyone, it
It's
will.
like become more aware of the rules that you're setting for yourself so that you can see which ones are helping you and which ones aren't, or which ones you might want to play with. But it's
Right.
all about this curiosity and this experimentation and just playing in that space. Because even being in that space, being curious and experimental about how
Mhm.
you make art will make you more likely to make art, right? You're in the right headspace again. You've achieved it in that
Yeah.
space. So,
I
oh,
don't want
so
a little
many
box
good
of like,
things.
this is how I create, because
Right.
that's so,
Yeah.
you know, whereas
Hmm.
I'm like, oh yeah, like I have paint. I also have an iPad. So if I want to work in Procreate, I have pens and paper. So I have different ways of how, you know what I mean? And I think um that's just me over the years learning that I like these different outlets and they each provide something for me in different ways.
And
So and
totally speaking to another block, right? Like we have been taught that you have to, like, what focus means. Of course, we need to
right,
have focus in our lives, but what focus means is that you have one specialty and you
right,
just stick with that. And if you're not, oh my gosh, but I don't
right.
know. I've never met a creative who does one thing. I've never,
No.
never, ever, ever, ever have I ever. And yet, so many people that I talk to think there's such a problem with it. And I'm like, not a problem. Like, that's not a problem. That's
Oh
not a
God.
problem. That's not a problem.
I,
Now, if you feel like you're never getting anywhere on anything, then we could talk
yeah.
about other means of focusing. But you having multiple ways to express yourself isn't the problem, isn't the focus
Right.
problem. Like, it's not.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Feel
good.
like one kind of leads to another too. Like, so like I went to school for photography and I worked in, galleries and fine art print houses for a number of years. And that was wonderful. But also for me framing and printing my photographs and my artwork then made me feel really removed from the creative process where I'm like putting on like gloves to handle things. And I didn't like that. I'm like, I like to
Mhm.
touch things. I want to be messy. And that also took time to figure that out. So I was like, but yeah, but that photography degree will help me learn to photograph my artwork. So I wouldn't have done that. And that led me to collage, which then led me to painting and all these other little offshoots. And so I think that's also the other, I mean, hey, I know people that were like, I found this one medium and that's it. I love that for them too. That's
Uh-huh.
just not
It's great. No, but not me. I know. Sometimes I envy them. Sometimes they're like, how did you get that gene? What is that gene? Like, I didn't get that one. That one track mind. I mean, amazing in a whole nother way.
and
Yeah,
again,
it's just so true.
freedom things. Like I love the freedom to work in, wood or paint or all of these different things, and I feel like then my vision as an artist ties them all together, you know
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And I know a lot of
Yes.
people need like structure, and I understand that in the beginning. And if you're like, you can do whatever you want, well, that's also overwhelming. And I when you're presented with everything and be like, here, you can pick, that
Mhm.
can be overwhelming. But I'm like, well, maybe this day I'm gonna pick this, and then the next day I'm gonna take that. And seeing, well, did I like the first thing? Maybe not. Or maybe I could take certain things away from that and use it for option two the next day.
Yeah, it's kind of all about like we need some kind of limit, really. Otherwise, it is overwhelming. But we
Right,
have to be careful about which ones, like be aware of the ones that we're choosing to use so that it's not squashing it, Like you could be free to do any kind of medium, go in your studio, make anything you want. But maybe your limit is I'm just going to let myself do that for 10 minutes, right? Like
right.
something that focuses or channels the energy is like really, really helpful. It's just good to know which ones so that you can keep playing with that and let it evolve into where it needs to be. I have one client, and I just think this is brilliant. He wrote down all of his ideas on different note cards and put them in a bag. And then, like, because he just couldn't choose what he wanted to work on each day. And then each day, his rule, his limit, his thing that he is following is his rule is he picks one out and he does it. He does whatever's on the card. That's what he works on for a while that day.
Love
And
that.
it works for him, right? Other people might be like, that would drive me bonkers, but I throw it
Right.
out there. It's an idea that might work for you if you do feel like you don't want
Yeah,
to give up any of your ideas, but you can't move
right.
forward. There's always some way of putting a limit that helps you instead of
Yeah,
hinders you.
like,
Yeah.
little parameters of how you're gonna work, but not rigid structures is really
5 minute
important.
doodles was mine. 5 minute
Right.
doodles. Set my timer, my book, and a doodle thing. No racing. Just let it
Yeah.
do it. That was another one of my rules. No racing. 5 minutes. Don't be precious. Don't figure it out ahead of time. Just go. And
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I could talk about this forever with you, obviously. And I hope that everybody watching and listening has got a tip or two from this. I think there's a plethora of them that came out that is just so exciting, and hopefully one of them just gave you something new to think on or chew on and play with in your practice, to either help you get unblocked or like, I don't know, try something new, get more juice flowing in a new way, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, but I really appreciate everything you brought to the table, Shannon, and thank you for having this conversation with me.
Thank you for having me. This is wonderful.
Yay! And to all you out there watching and listening, I hope that you find some creative flow in your day and that you keep showing up for yourself. Keep showing up for you and your creativity. And it will show up for you too. Just keep playing and experimenting. And thanks for being in this creative revolution with all of us. Until next time.